Bruce Lee was teaching 300 students when arrogant master challenged him. 5 seconds later. Bruce Lee is teaching 300 students when a traditional kung fu master storms through the door and publicly questions everything he stands for. What happens in the next 5 seconds not only shocks everyone present, but becomes one of the most talked about moments in the history of martial arts. Los Angeles, California. Spring afternoon, 1969. The training hall occupies an entire warehouse in Chinatown, right on North Broadway. You enter through a heavy steel door that groans on its hinges every time someone opens it. Inside, exposed brick walls rise 6 meters to the ceiling, which is crisscrossed with old wooden beams. Industrial windows line the upper half of the walls, casting dusty streaks of afternoon light across the room. No decorations, no mirrors, no photos of old masters gazing down sternly at the students. Just an open space, wooden floor, and possibilities. This is Bruce Lee's philosophy in architectural form. It's 2:30 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon. Outside, Los Angeles broods under the relentless Californian sun, which turns bonnets into frying pans. Inside, the air conditioning battles against the body heat of 300 people. Not 200. Not 250. Exactly 300. Bruce counted them as they entered, because he tracks everything, measures everything, quantifies everything. That's how his mind works. The students fill every available space. The front rows sit cross-legged on the hardwood floor, their backs completely straight, because Bruce teaches that posture is not only physical but also mental. Behind them, more students sit on folding chairs borrowed from the neighboring church. People stand shoulder to shoulder along the walls. At the back, the latecomers crowd against the steel door and stretch to see over the heads and between the bodies. The smell in the room is sweat and determination. That specific smell of people pushing their bodies beyond their comfort zone. The sound is breathing, controlled, rhythmic. The kind of breathing Bruce teaches. The kind that oxygenates the muscles, calms the mind, and transforms ordinary people into something more efficient. Someone has opened the tall windows with a long pole, but the breeze barely penetrates. The room is an oven, a forge, a place where people come to be remolded. Bruce Lee stands at the front and teaches. He wears black sweatpants with an elastic waistband. No shirt. He teaches without a shirt because he wants his students to see how muscles work, how the body moves beneath the skin, what efficiency looks like in practice, not just in theory. He's 28 years old, 1.70 m tall, 64 kilograms of muscle that moves like coiled wire. Not bulky, not fat, streamlined, like something designed in a wind tunnel for maximum efficiency and minimum drag. His skin glistens with sweat in the afternoon light streaming through the tall windows. His hair, usually perfectly combed, is now tousled after 2 hours of non-stop demonstrations. This is one of his famous open sessions, the ones he holds 4 times a year, open to anyone who wants to attend. Where traditional martial artists come to see what all the controversy is about. Where skeptics come to prove he's a fraud. Where believers come to worship him. Where journalists come to write articles with titles like, "The Man Who Would Reinvent Kung Fu," or "Is Bruce Lee a Genius or Just a Good Marketer?" The room is always packed. Always. Because Bruce Lee has become more than just a martial arts teacher. He has become a phenomenon. A controversy. A question that the martial arts world cannot stop discussing. Today's audience is typical. Half are devoted students who train with him 3, 4, or 5 times a week. People who have reorganized their entire lives around his class schedule. Who have left other schools. Who have driven hundreds of kilometers. Who have told their traditional teachers that they are done with classical forms and old techniques that don't work in real combat. The other half, outsiders, visitors. Some are genuinely curious, others openly hostile. Traditional kung fu teachers who have heard that Bruce Lee considers their methods outdated. Karate black belts who have heard that he considers their techniques too rigid. boxers who have heard that he claims to have the fastest hands in martial arts. They are all here to judge, to evaluate, to decide whether this young Chinese man who speaks perfect English, quotes philosophy, and moves like no one they have ever seen is genuine, or just another fraud selling exotic mysticism to Americans hungry for Eastern wisdom. Bruce has been in the session for 90 minutes. He demonstrates what he calls directness. He explains that most martial arts are like conversations in which people take turns speaking. One person attacks, the other defends, then they switch back and forth. Polite, structured, completely artificial. He shows them that a real fight is not a conversation. It is an interruption. It is interrupting someone mid-sentence. It is attacking while the other person is still preparing for the attack. It is being where the other person does not expect you to be, faster than they can react, more direct than their training allows them to counter. He calls a student to the front, a big guy, former wrestler, 1.80 m tall, maybe 90 kilograms. The guy takes a fighting stance. Hands up. Ready? Bruce stands casually, hands at his sides, talking to the crowd and barely looking at the student. He explains that traditional fighting stances betray intentions, that they reveal which style you practice, that they give informed opponents a roadmap of what to expect. He speaks in a calm, instructive voice when suddenly, his hand shoots out. Not a punch, a touch. Fingertips against the student's chest so fast that half the room doesn't notice. The student's eyes widen. He didn't see it coming, didn't react, didn't even move. Bruce's hand is back at his side before the student's brain registers what happened. That, says Bruce, could have been a punch. In a real fight, that would have ended the conversation. But because I'm not bound by classical positions, formal stances, and announcing my intentions, I can act while you're still preparing to act. That's directness. That's efficiency. That's... The steel door creaks open. The sound cuts through Bruce's words like a knife through silk. All heads turn. The door opens slowly, deliberately, with the weight of someone who wants his entrance to be noticed. And through that door steps a man who plunges the already tense room into absolute silence. He is perhaps 50 years old. He is wearing a traditional silk kung fu uniform. Not the modern training clothes that most students wear, real silk, black with gold buttons. Then his gaze falls on Bruce Lee, and when he speaks, his voice carries far, deep, commanding. His English is tinged with Cantonese, but clear enough that each of the 300 people understands him perfectly. Bruce Lee. No greeting, an accusation. Those two words hang in the air like smoke from a gun. Despite the heat, the temperature in the room drops. All the students freeze. The big wrestler who is still standing at the front is forgotten. All attention is now focused on this man in the doorway. This uninvited guest. This challenge in the flesh. Bruce turns slowly. His expression does not change. Calm. Curious. Like someone observing an interesting insect that has landed on his arm. Not threatened. Not angry. Just attentive. Completely, utterly attentive. His body language changes subtly. Nothing obvious, but the students who have trained with him long enough notice it. His weight shifts. His hands, still at his sides, look somehow ready, like casually held weapons, like possibilities waiting to become actions. Yes, says Bruce. One word. Neutral. Revealing nothing. The man now steps fully into the room. The steel door slams shut behind him with a loud bang. The sound makes several students flinch. He walks forward without hurrying, each step deliberate. His hands are clasped behind his back. A traditional stance. The posture of a master who fears nothing because he has spent 50 years becoming untouchable. He stops about 3 meters in front of Bruce. Close enough to be confrontational. Far enough to maintain the illusion of respect. I am Master Wong Tenlock, he says, and he says it as if he expects the name to mean something. as if it should make people marvel or bow or show deference. I teach Wing Chun in San Francisco. Traditional Wing Chun. The authentic method passed down by Ip Man, the man who was your teacher, before you gave up everything he taught you. The words hit like blows. Given up. That word echoes in the room. Some of Bruce's students resist. Dan Inosanto, sitting in the front row, clenches his jaw, but Bruce raises a hand slightly. A gesture so small it is almost invisible. A call for calm. His students calm down. Barely. The tension in the room is palpable. Master Wong, says Bruce, his voice still calm and instructive. What brings you to Los Angeles? To my school? To interrupt a class of 300 students who have come here to learn. Wong's face hardens even more. I came because I've heard enough. For 2 years, I've been hearing stories about Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee, who says classical kung fu is useless. Bruce Lee, who tells his students to forget traditional forms. Bruce Lee, who claims to have invented something new and better. Bruce Lee, who brings shame upon his teacher, his lineage, and his art. With each sentence, his voice grows louder. By the end, he is almost shouting. I came to see if these stories are true. And if they are true, to show these 300 students that you are a fraud. That your methods are disrespectful. That your so-called philosophy is nothing but arrogance wrapped in English words. The room explodes. The students shout. Some defend Bruce. Others demand that Wong leave. The noise level rises instantly. But Bruce doesn't move. He doesn't react. He just stands there and watches Wong with the same calm, curious expression. As if he were watching a student struggling with a technique. As if this were just another teaching moment. Another opportunity to demonstrate a principle. He raises his hand again, and this time the gesture is larger. More authoritative. The room falls silent. Not gradually. Instantly. As if someone had flipped a switch. That is the level of respect his students have for him. That is the control he exerts. When Bruce Lee asks for silence, 300 people give him that silence. Master Wong, says Bruce. And now there is something different in his voice. No anger. Something more dangerous. Certainty. You traveled here to prove that I am a fraud. To show my students that traditional methods are superior. To defend the honor of Wing Chun and the legacy of IP Man. Wong nods vigorously. Yes, exactly that. Bruce tilts his head slightly. Then let me make you an offer. In front of these 300 witnesses. In front of students and skeptics and traditional martial artists. Let me prove to you now whether my methods work or whether, as you say, I'm just arrogant. The room holds its breath. Everyone is frozen. Wong's eyes narrow. What do you propose? Bruce's expression does not change, but something in his energy shifts. Like a taut spring about to release. Like water before it becomes a tsunami. Give me 5 seconds, Bruce says quietly. 5 seconds to show whether traditional Wing Chun can defend itself against what I teach. If you can stop me, block me, or counter me in those 5 seconds, I will close this school. I will apologize publicly. I will admit that you are right and I am wrong. The room holds its breath. The pause continues. Everyone leans forward, unconsciously. But, if I can show you the limitations of the classical methods, he pauses again. Then you stay here for the rest of the class. You sit with my students. You learn with an open mind. You allow for the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there are things that your 50 years of training haven't taught you. Wong's expression changes from angry to shocked, to calculating in the space of 3 heartbeats. He came here to humiliate Bruce Lee, to expose him, to destroy his reputation in front of 300 witnesses. And now Bruce is offering him exactly what he wants. Public demonstration. A clear winner and loser. The ultimate test. The ultimate proof. Wong looks around the room. He sees 300 faces staring at him, waiting. He sees cameras. Someone has a film camera. This will be recorded. Whatever happens here will be repeated, discussed, and analyzed for years to come. For decades. His legacy depends on what happens in the next 60 seconds. He looks at Bruce. This small man in black trousers and no shirt. This dropout from traditional training. This revolutionary who claims that the old methods are outdated. And Wong makes his decision. 5 seconds, he says. I accept your challenge. And when I have proven that Wing Chun is superior, you will never speak disrespectfully of traditional methods again. Bruce nods once. Dan, he says, without taking his eyes off Wong. Stop the time. Dan Inosanto pulls out his watch. His hand trembles slightly. Not from fear, from anticipation. Because he knows what is about to happen. Because he understands that everyone in this room is about to witness something they will talk about for the rest of their lives. At first, no one understood what he meant. 5 seconds. 5 seconds for what? To prepare? To start? To finish? Master Chen's, Wong's, expression showed confusion. His posture swayed slightly as he tried to process Bruce's words. But Bruce was no longer looking at Chun. He was looking at Dan Inosanto in the front row. Dan, stop the time, he said calmly. From the moment I move until Master Chun understands. 5 seconds. Dan took out his watch, his thumb hovering over the timer button. His face was a mixture of anticipation and something else. Concern, perhaps. Or maybe excitement about what he knew was coming. The other students did not have this knowledge. They only had the tension, the impossibility of the claim. 5 seconds to prove that decades of traditional training were incomplete. 5 seconds to demonstrate an entire philosophy. Seemed absurd. Master Chun seemed to think so, too, because his confidence returned and flooded his posture. 5 seconds, he repeated, and now there was contempt in his voice. You're going to defeat me in 5 seconds? Prove me wrong in 5 seconds. He laughed a short, bitter laugh. That's exactly the arrogance I wanted to expose. Bruce said nothing. He just stood there, feet shoulder-width apart, hands hanging loosely at his sides. No fighting stance. No traditional defensive posture. He just stood there like someone waiting for the bus, like someone who has absolutely nothing to prove, and all the time in the world. That alone was an insult to Chun. This casual disregard for proper form, for the rituals of combat, for the respect that should exist between martial artists. Chen's face turned red. You're mocking me with your casualness. You're standing there like a child, like someone who has never trained. I stand there like someone who is ready for anything, Bruce replied quietly. Your posture tells me exactly what you're up to. You're in anger. You're going to try to use your iron bridge technique, your powerful hand strikes. You've trained your forearms to be hard as wood. Your stance is immovable as mountains. But Master Chun, what happens when the mountain is asked to move like water? What happens when your strength meets speed you don't see coming? Chen's eyes flashed. He had had enough of words, enough of philosophy, enough of this young upstart who thought he could rewrite the history of martial arts. Then show me, he demanded, his voice swelling to a shout. Stop talking and show me the superior method. Show the students why they should give up the proper training. Show me now. The room vibrated with his anger, with the power of his conviction. And Bruce Lee nodded once. A small gesture of agreement. He looked at Dan. Start the stopwatch. Dan's thumb pressed the button. Click. The sound was impossibly loud in the quiet room. And Bruce moved. But moved is not the right word. Movement implies a beginning and an end. It implies something you can follow with your eyes. it implies a process. What Bruce did was occupy the space differently. One moment he was standing casually a meter away from Master Chun. The next moment he was inside Chen's defense, so close that they were almost touching, and his hand was outstretched. One finger pressing lightly against Chen's chest, just above the heart. No punch, no fist, no grabbing, no holding, no throwing. Just a finger, a touch. It rested there like a question mark made flesh. Master Chen's eyes widened. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Because in that moment, he understood something that destroyed everything he thought he knew. He hadn't seen Bruce. 35 years of training, thousands of hours of sparring, decades of refining his reflexes and perception, and he hadn't seen it. His body hadn't reacted. His hands, trained to instinctively block and counter, had frozen in their defensive stance and remained useless. His rooted stance, his immovable mountain stance, which he had practiced until his legs were like iron, had been completely bypassed. Bruce had not tried to move him, had not tried to throw him off balance, had not tried to overcome his strength. Bruce had simply been somewhere Chun couldn't defend himself. And that finger, pressed so gently against his chest, carried a message that was unmistakable to anyone who knew anything about fighting. Had that been a punch instead of a touch? Had Bruce used even a fraction of his strength, Chun would now be lying on the floor, possibly unconscious, possibly worse. 1 second, Bruce said quietly, his finger still resting on Chen's chest. The room was completely silent. 300 people barely held their breath, their minds desperately trying to process what they had just seen, or rather what they had not seen because it had happened too quickly for human perception. Bruce withdrew his hand, but did not step back. He remained within Chen's defense, violating every principle of safety and distance, demonstrating that this space now belonged to him. That Chen's defensive position meant nothing. "You think you weren't ready?" Bruce said, his voice now gentle, almost friendly. "You think it was a trick? That I moved faster than you expected? That you would have been prepared in a real fight?" Master Chen's face was no longer red with anger. It was pale, the color draining as the realization dawned on him. He opened his mouth to say something, but then closed it again. Finally, he managed to say, "How did you?" "Let's try it again," said Bruce, stepping back into his relaxed stance. "This time you know I'm coming. You're ready. You're prepared. Use everything you know. 35 years of training. Let's see if it's any good." Dan looked at his watch, his expression stunned. "That was 1.2 seconds, he said in little more than a whisper. A wave went through the 300 students. A collective gasp. Incredulous murmurs. 1.2 seconds. Master Chun had traveled 5 hours to challenge Bruce Lee. He had stood before 300 witnesses and demanded proof. He had gotten it in 1.2 seconds. But Bruce wasn't done yet. "One more time," he said to Chun. "You have 4 seconds left. Show me the traditional training. Show me the forms you've practiced 10,000 times. Show me the wisdom of 8 generations of masters." It was an invitation, a challenge, and a lesson all at once. Chen's pride struggled with the proof of what had just happened. Every instinct told him to leave this hall and never speak of this moment again. But he had made this public. He had challenged Bruce in front of 300 witnesses. To leave now would be to confirm everything Bruce had said about traditional martial arts being stuck in the past, about forms being useless in real combat, about the need to evolve beyond old methods. Chun resumed his stance. This time, his concentration was absolute. His eyes fixed on Bruce like laser beams. His body was tense, ready to spring into action at the first movement. He was ready now, really ready. Every nerve was taut, all his senses sharpened, every technique he had ever learned, loaded and ready to go. Bruce stood casually and waited. "Whenever you're ready, Master Chun." This time Chun didn't wait. He lunged forward, his body moving with genuine skill and power. His front hand shooting out in a traditional punch backed by 40 pounds of forearm strength. His rear hand ready for a follow-up attack. His footwork solid and precise. It was actually beautiful to watch. The result of decades of dedicated practice. For a split second, it looked like it might actually work. And then Bruce was simply no longer there. He had slipped past Chen's attack, moving at an angle that took him completely out of the line of force. And as Chen's punch went through empty air, Bruce's hand touched his shoulder so lightly that it was almost a caress. The message was clear. That could have been a punch to the jaw, to the temple, to the throat. Chun tried to recover, to turn around and bring his other hand into play, to adjust to this new position with the help of his training. But Bruce was already moving again, flowing like water around Chen's counterattack. And this time, his finger touched the side of Chen's neck, right where the carotid artery pulsed. Another point, another opening, another moment when Chen's life would have been in Bruce's hands in a real fight. Chun turned, trying to reposition himself to get back into his stance, to find ground where his superior experience could come into play. But Bruce had already touched him 3 more times, once on the floating rib, once on the kidney, once on the back of the knee, a light blow that nevertheless sent a clear message about what a real blow would do. Chun stumbled slightly, not because of the force Bruce had used, but because of the psychological effect of being completely and utterly outclassed. His hands were still in a defensive stance, still ready to block and counter, but they were blocking air, defending against attacks that did not come from the angles he had trained for. Bruce had turned the entire structure of traditional combat, with its formal stances and prescribed techniques, into a cage that trapped Chun in his own knowledge. "Stop!" Chun said suddenly, his voice hoarse. He straightened up and let his hands fall to his sides. His chest rose and fell, not from physical exertion, but from the emotional shock of what had just happened to him. Dan looked at his watch again. "For 0.8 seconds, he announced, and this time his voice sounded stronger, filled with something like awe. Total time, 6 seconds. Bruce had given himself a second's leeway and used it to prove his point 6 times over. Finally, Chun straightened up, and when he bowed to Bruce, it was a deep bow. The bow of a student to a teacher, not the formal bow of one master acknowledging another. "I would like," he said, his voice steady now, accepting, "to stay for the rest of your class if you will allow it. I would like to learn what you teach, not to abandon what I know, but to add to it, to evolve it, to make it alive instead of preserved." A smile broke across Bruce's face like sunrise. "Master Chun, there's a spot right there in the front row. Dan, make room." Dan Inosanto immediately shifted over, and several students around him did the same, creating a space. Chun walked to it, his gait different now, less rigid, as if even his body was already beginning to let go of some of that classical structure. As he sat down cross-legged on the floor in his traditional uniform, surrounded by students in modern workout clothes, the incongruity was obvious. But somehow it also felt right, like a bridge being built between past and future. Bruce addressed the room again, his voice carrying that electric quality that made every word feel important. "Let me tell you all something crucial. What you just witnessed wasn't about me being superior to Master Chun in a different context. In a formal challenge match with rules and referees and traditional structure, Master Chun might have advantages I don't have. His conditioning is incredible. His power is real. His dedication is unquestionable. But I didn't meet him in his context. I met him in reality. No rules, no ref, no warning, just action and reaction. And that's the point. Real combat doesn't care about your lineage. It doesn't care how famous your teacher was. It doesn't care how many forms you've memorized. It only cares about one thing. Can you respond effectively to what's actually happening in the moment?" He moved to the center of the room, and 300 students, plus one humbled master, leaned forward. This is why I teach Jeet Kune Do as a philosophy, not a style. The moment it becomes a style, it becomes limited. It becomes something that can be studied, predicted, countered. The moment you say, this is how we do it in JKD, you've already lost, because real combat doesn't care about how you do it. It only cares about whether you did it. One of the senior students, a young man named Jerry who'd been with Bruce for 3 years, raised his hand. Bruce nodded at him. Sifu? But don't we need some structure? Some foundation? Master Chun trained for 35 years. Most of us have trained for only a few years. How do we develop skill without forms? Without repetition? Without traditional methods? It was a good question. The question that many students struggled with when they first encountered Bruce's philosophy. Bruce's eyes lit up. This was what he loved, the chance to break down complex ideas into understandable pieces. Jerry, excellent question. Yes, you need structure. You need fundamentals. But there's a difference between training fundamentals and being trapped by them. Think about learning to write. First, you learn the alphabet. You practice forming letters over and over until it becomes automatic. That's necessary. That's foundation. But what if, after learning the alphabet, your teacher told you that you could only write in one specific style of calligraphy, using only certain approved words, forming sentences in only traditional patterns? You'd be able to create beautiful writing, but you'd never be able to express your own thoughts. You'd be a copying machine, not a writer. The analogy landed. You could see it in the students' faces. Understanding spreading like ripples in a pond. Bruce continued, warming to the subject. Traditional martial arts train you in the alphabet. That's valuable. Learn the basic punches, kicks, blocks, footwork. Drill them until they're reflexive. But then you have to move beyond. You have to learn to create your own sentences. Express your own truth. Respond to situations that the old masters never encountered because they lived in different times, fought different battles, faced different challenges. Master Chen's 8th-generation lineage learned to fight people who fought exactly like them. Same weapons, same rules, same cultural context. But you live now. Your opponents might be boxers, wrestlers, jiu-jitsu fighters, street fighters with no training at all. Are you going to use a technique that was designed to counter a spear attack from a Ming Dynasty soldier? Or are you going to understand the principle behind that technique and adapt it to work against what you're actually facing? Master Chun spoke up from his position on the floor, and every head turned to look at him. What you're saying is that I have been practicing the alphabet my entire life. Beautiful calligraphy, perfect letters, but I never learned to write my own story. Bruce pointed at him, a gesture of acknowledgement. Exactly. And Master Chun, your calligraphy is probably magnificent. Your fundamentals are probably better than 99 of martial artists. But fundamentals are the beginning, not the end. They are the foundation you build on, not the ceiling that limits you. He turned back to the broader group. This is what I want you to understand. When I touched Master Chun 6 times in 5 seconds, I wasn't using techniques I'd memorized from a form. I was reading his body, feeling his intention, responding to what he was actually doing, not what I expected him to do. That's the difference. That's what makes you truly dangerous in combat. Not your collection of techniques, but your ability to perceive, process, and respond faster than your opponent can complete their action.